The laughter echoed across the crowded estate auction yard the moment the young woman raised her hand and offered $100 for the ugliest item on the property. It was a rust-covered iron chest with broken handles, thick layers of dust, and heavy welds sealing every edge shut. Even the auctioneer struggled to hide a smile as the crowd whispered that she had just thrown away her last savings on nothing more than a pile of worthless metal. No one knew that this single decision would uncover a story hidden for more than 70 years, change countless lives, and prove that the greatest treasures are never measured by gold alone. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and hope can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing emotional stories like this one. Emily Harper was 26 years old and carried more burdens than most people twice her age. After losing both of her parents within 3 years, she had inherited nothing except unpaid bills, a tiny rented apartment, and an old notebook filled with her father's dreams of restoring forgotten pieces of history. He had always believed that every abandoned object carried a human story waiting to be remembered. Whenever they visited flea markets or estate sales together, he would remind her that people often ignored what looked broken because they never bothered to imagine what had once made it valuable. Those memories stayed alive long after he was gone. The estate auction belonged to the family of an elderly veteran who had passed away without leaving any close relatives. His farmhouse had stood untouched for decades, filled with furniture, books, paintings, tools, and countless forgotten belongings. Antique dealers filled the yard, searching for valuable collectibles they could resell for thousands of dollars. Emily arrived with only $100 in her pocket, hoping to find something small she could restore and sell for enough money to pay next month's rent. Hours passed as expensive antiques disappeared into the hands of wealthy collectors. Every beautiful cabinet, elegant clock, and rare painting sold for prices Emily could never afford. She quietly watched from the back, trying not to lose hope. Then the workers dragged out the rusted iron chest. It looked terrible. The surface was covered with deep orange rust. One corner had been crushed years earlier. Thick steel plates had been crudely welded around every opening, making it impossible to unlock. Even the auctioneer admitted nobody knew what was inside because no one had been able to open it. Most bidders laughed before the auction even started. One collector joked that someone had probably welded it shut to keep the garbage from falling out. Another guessed it contained nothing except old bricks. Emily noticed something nobody else seemed to care about. Under the rust, barely visible beneath decades of corrosion, she spotted a small brass emblem shaped like an oak tree. Her father had once shown her the exact same symbol in an old history book. It belonged to a craftsman famous for building custom storage chests during the 1940s. Every piece he created had been handmade, and many contained hidden compartments designed to protect family heirlooms during wartime. Her heart began racing. The auctioneer opened the bidding at $100. Silence. Nobody wanted it. Emily slowly lifted her hand. Sold. The crowd burst into laughter. Some shook their heads with pity while others openly mocked her decision. She ignored every word, loaded the impossibly heavy chest into a borrowed trailer, and drove home wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. For 3 days she worked tirelessly in the tiny parking space outside her apartment building. She scrubbed away rust, studied every welded seam, and searched old restoration manuals at the local library. Professional locksmiths refused to help because opening it without destroying it would require hundreds of dollars she simply did not have. Instead of giving up, Emily borrowed tools, watched restoration techniques, and patiently removed tiny sections of the weld one careful cut at a time. Late on the fourth evening, something unexpected happened. A small section of the metal shifted. The lid moved less than an inch. With trembling hands, she carefully pried it open. A cloud of stale air escaped after what felt like generations trapped inside. At first glance, she felt crushing disappointment. There were no piles of gold. No sparkling diamonds. No stacks of cash. Only dozens of old envelopes, journals, faded photographs, military medals, children's drawings, and neatly wrapped bundles tied together with worn blue ribbon. She sat quietly on the floor. For a moment, she wondered if everyone at the auction had been right. Then she opened the very first envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter dated December 1944. It described a young soldier preparing to leave for Europe. He wrote to the woman he loved, promising that if he survived the war, they would build a home beneath the giant oak tree where they first met. His words overflowed with hope, fear, and dreams that sounded so alive Emily almost felt she knew him personally. She opened another letter. Then another. Soon she realized the chest contained hundreds of letters exchanged between families separated by war, along with diaries documenting their daily lives through years of hardship, sacrifice, and resilience. At the very bottom rested a sealed leather folder. Inside were carefully organized documents proving ownership of several acres of farmland that had never been claimed after the war because the surviving relatives believed every legal record had been destroyed in a courthouse fire. Emily stared at the papers in disbelief. The land itself was now worth several $1,000,000. She could have quietly claimed everything for herself. Almost nobody would ever know. She desperately needed money. Her rent was overdue. Her car barely worked. She had skipped meals more than once that month just to keep the electricity on. Yet every letter she had read reminded her of something her father used to say. Character is measured by what you do when nobody is watching. Emily contacted local historians instead of lawyers. What happened next surprised everyone. News spread across the town as experts confirmed that the letters formed one of the most complete private wartime family collections ever discovered in the region. Historians described them as priceless pieces of human history because they documented ordinary families instead of famous political leaders or military officers. Every page revealed acts of courage, heartbreak, forgiveness, and hope that textbooks rarely captured. As researchers searched public records, they eventually located several descendants of the families whose letters had been hidden inside the welded chest for generations. Many had spent their entire lives believing those memories were lost forever. When they finally held their grandparents' handwritten letters, tears filled their eyes before they could even finish reading the first page. One elderly woman hugged Emily for several minutes without speaking. She simply cried while holding a faded photograph of parents she had never truly known. Emily realized then that she had uncovered something far greater than treasure. She had returned forgotten pieces of people's hearts. Before this story reaches its ending, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and share one act of kindness that changed your life. We'd love to read every message. The legal documents inside the chest eventually allowed the rightful heirs to reclaim the forgotten farmland. Grateful beyond words, the families refused to let Emily walk away empty-handed. Together they created a generous reward fund for her honesty. It paid every debt she owed, helped her purchase a small historic workshop, and financed her dream of restoring forgotten antiques exactly as her father had always imagined. Years later, the little workshop became famous not because it uncovered expensive treasures, but because every restored object came with the story of the people connected to it. Visitors traveled from across the country not simply to buy antiques, but to remember that every old possession had once belonged to someone who laughed, cried, hoped, and loved just as deeply as we do today. The rusty welded chest that everyone mocked remained in the center of the workshop. Emily never polished away every scar because she wanted people to remember its lesson. What looked worthless on the outside had protected memories more valuable than any fortune. The crowd had laughed because they judged with their eyes. Emily looked with her heart. And perhaps that is the greatest treasure any person can ever discover, that kindness, honesty, and compassion always leave a richer inheritance than gold. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and remember that sometimes the greatest miracles are hidden inside the things the world has already given up on.